I mean, sometimes I get up here and I feel like a motivational speaker, and that's the effect I have on you guys sometimes. So glad you guys are here. My name is Chandler. News for you guys. This week, we're going to be talking relationships. Specifically this week is going to be family relationships. Show of hands, how many of you guys have a good relationship with your parents? I like how nobody was up here. It's just right about here. You know, like, I like to call them my roommates, if you will. You know. Now, in an average week, how many fights would you guys say you had with your parents? So I'd say more than 7, right? At least one a day. But I don't know if you guys knew this, but when you fight with your parents, it actually leads to gas, tension, bloating. That's how you become gluten intolerant. So those of you who love the glutens, don't argue with your parents. I'm not a medical professional by any means, but it's just what I heard. But some of the things you guys fight over the most, I think I've narrowed it down to the top 5 things. And I'm going to say, well, in no particular order, 1 is going to be school. I mean, that's a given. Why don't you study more? Why don't you have higher grades? Why don't you wake up and actually go to school? Why'd you get kicked out of school? Whatever. Now, the second one, it's always going to be about either your man friends or your lady friends. And I don't mean your friends like, you know, your man friend or your lady friend. You guys picking up what I'm laying down? Okay, just making sure. The third one is groceries and food. And then what I hear the most is, or what I used to say the most is, there's not enough food in the house. Why are we so poor? But yet you open up the pantry and it's like this mecca of random foods that no one would ever eat. And then what happens is what I like to refer to as mom or dad magic, depending on who the chef is in your house. They go in there, and then within an hour, the table is full of food. But yet, when you looked in that same pantry, there was nothing in there to eat for human consumption. So I don't know what happens, but I'm glad it does. Or, I don't know, I'm pretty sure a lot of the ladies in here could match it. But in my experience, I've heard, like, the guys just don't stop eating. I don't know what it is about Aiden and Cole, and if you don't know them, those are my 2 sons. But when the 11-year-old has a plate the same size as me, there's a problem. But yet, we eat the same, but I keep gaining weight and he keeps losing it. I don't understand that. Now, I know there's some females in here that are like, oh, I could put away a large pizza or 2 and, you know, whatever the case may be. Number 4 is curfew. Mom, I'm in 9th grade. I'm a grown person now. I should be able to stay out till 4 o'clock in the morning like my friends. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I think the saying is nothing good happens after 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. So, it's pretty safe to say that if you're hanging out with the upper crust, you know, the upper echelon of all that Stockbridge has to offer at the Waffle House at 1:30 in the morning, it's pretty much safe to say nothing good is happening other than high cholesterol and diabetes. And the last one is your friends. All right? Oh, that's not a true friend. Yes, it is, Mom. My friend would die for me. But this is the same friend that when you're like, hey, I need a ride. Oh, I'm in bed. I can't pick you up till tomorrow. But I need a ride today. But you tell your parents, they're ride to die, Mom. If I need them there, they'd be there tonight. They bust me out of jail. I mean, they'd have to borrow money from their parents because they don't have a job and they got kicked out of school. But they're awesome friends. And what's funny is, you remember this. Hear me now, believe me yesterday, think about it tomorrow, marinate on it next month. But what's going to happen is, the friends that you have now, when you look back on it, you're going to be like, oh, my parents are like a guru. How did they know? How did they know the guy with missing 4 fingers from shop class, nicknamed Lucky, was not going to be there for my entire life? But all this fighting goes back to the number one thing, which is relationships. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So those of you, make sure you fill that in, okay? Because I don't want to get phone calls later about I don't know what the fill-in one is. Now, those of you who've been around me for a while, I always tell you there's no reason to fight unless it affects your family or paycheck. But yet we're talking about that right now tonight. We're talking about family. That's half of what we're talking about. So yeah, I would take this a little serious. Just a little bit. And what I like to tell some of my colleagues at work, or even my little tax write-offs, my kids, I would tell them, listen, before you do that, before you make your decision, you got to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, we'll come back to that. But that basically means you got to pick your battles, not your wars. So we all talked about earlier that there's more than one battle every day with your parents. But that's not the war. Those are just battles. I think the war ends never, but the battles keep continuing way past 18. So if you thought there was an end in sight for that, it's not going to happen. Because what you guys deem as important now, what you're fighting your battles over now with your parents, words hurt, and when you cut your parents to the core of them, they don't forget as easily. So when you look at your parent and you say, I wish you would die because if you loved me, you would have bought me that Pokemon XY gold, level 15. I don't know who even plays Pokemon, but whatever. I don't judge. Yes, I do. But I remember the conversation I had with my parents, and I was like, you know what? I want an Atari 2600, and if you would love me, you would get that for me. Now, let's just say I held a grudge for the past 10 plus years about that. And I told them, and I never talked to my parents again, and I thought they were lazy deadbeat parents for not getting me that Atari. But we all know now that if I'm playing on 8-bit graphics with the joystick with one button that doesn't work, I'd be like, really, Chandler? You severed your relationship with your parents over an Atari? ColecoVision, I get it, but Atari? But it's all in perspective. Replace Atari with anything. You ask your parents to borrow the car. You ask your parents to stay out late. That whatever that object or that battle is, that could be anything. But that damage with the relationship that you have with your family, some of you guys are going through it right now where you're like, me and my parents don't have a relationship. So the question is, if the damage is done, because a lot of our previous talks have been like, well, the relationships are all great. But what happens when the damage is done? So I've invited a special friend to help me through this, a.k.a. Twinkle Toes, a.k.a. White Lightning, a.k.a. Tiny Dancer, a.k.a. Jay Wheezy, a.k.a. Left Shoe, a.k.a. Mambo number 5, a.k.a. not number 23, a.k.a. I Believe I Can Fly, a.k.a. I'm running out of AKAs. Come on out. Give her a round of applause. Jordyn.
Hey guys! So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jordyn, and I'm a sophomore at Woodland High School, and I've pretty much been a part of this church since as long as I can remember. And I've been a part of this youth group for since I've been able to, so the block party when I was going into 6th grade, I've been here for a while. So to start off, I have a few questions. Who here has ever been angry at somebody? Come on, everybody. But who has ever been so angry that they began to get angry at God because of the anger? Yeah? A few people? Well, that's pretty much what I'm going to talk to you about. I have a story. So when I was younger, I was the biggest daddy's girl. You could not get me away from my dad to save your life. I loved my dad. I would get so excited when he came home. I vividly remember being 5 years old, being this tall, waiting for him to come home, where's my dad? Where's my dad? And I would hear the door open, and I'd be oh, he's home. Oh my goodness, he's home. So I would get so excited. A little 3 or 4 or 5 year old was so excited to see your dad. And he'd walk in, and he'd see me, and his face would just light up, and he would drop his stuff, and he'd be Jordyn, and he'd get down on his knees and open his arms very wide, and he'd hug me for 5 minutes, and he'd spin me around. But very quickly, that started to change, because him and my parents got a divorce when I was really young. I was 6 or so. That was the one thing in my life that completely turned my life around. I lost my dad because he left. I took my dad leaving as him wanting some other family, as me not being enough, me not being the person or the kid that he loves the most. I took it okay, Daddy, what are you doing? Why did you leave me here? Why did you just leave me like that? And that was really hard. And then later, he never really showed an interest in my church life, what I'm doing to pursue my relationship with God or anything. But that's hard for me because I'm so involved with my church and I love what I do here, and this is my everything. And I'm I don't understand why he doesn't get it. So there was this one time where I was supposed to be working VBS. That's my favorite thing to do during the summer. I look forward to camp and VBS. That's the best part of summer. So that week for VBS, the week after, we were supposed to leave to go to Mississippi because my stepmom's parents live there. And he wanted me to go. He called me a week or two before. I was hey, will you go to Mississippi with us? And I was okay, sure. But me being 11 years old forgot that I had VBS. So he called me that Thursday night, and I was he's we had our conversation. He said, Jordyn, are you coming to the VBS? And I was oh, crap. Mississippi. I was oh, crap, I got to tell him about this. So I was Daddy, I can't come. And the next thing that he said, it haunts me every single day. I think about it every single day in my life. He said, Jordyn, you really know how to disappoint me. I want to teach these kids about Jesus. I want to push these kids toward God. I want to help them. I want to be that light in their life. And he said, he's called me a disappointment because I didn't want to spend time with him, and I'd rather do this church thing than spend time with him or go to some family trip that I really didn't even care about going to. That really hurt. So I also mentioned that he doesn't really show an interest. So when I started interning up here for about a year ago. I come up here once a week, do a few things for Tim and Chesney, and that's really helped my walk with God. I was so excited about it. I was oh my gosh, I get to do this thing, and I get to do this thing for God, and I get to take a next step in my life, and I get to get closer to God, and I get to work with all these people. So obviously I was excited to tell my dad about it, right? So that night on the phone, I was Daddy, guess what? He's what? And I was I get to be an intern at my church. How cool is that? Who gets to do that? And he was okay, cool. I was and I told him everything that I get to do. And he was okay. And then he started talking about his horses and his life and his day at work. And in my head, I was why doesn't he care? Why did that not excite him? That his daughter is pursuing this relationship with God and taking this next step and just doing everything that she probably can to get closer to God and teach other people about God. Why can't that go through his head that that I'm doing this for a reason. So he just gets upset with me when I can't go down to his house or when I can't do certain things because I have a church thing. He gets upset. He's like, oh, I really wish you could come. And I'm like, Daddy, I can't. I have this church thing. And you can just I can hear in his voice that he gets disappointed, and then the conversation's over 10 seconds later. And I was like, okay. And then about 2 years after my parents got a divorce, my mom met this other man. And they got married, and the marriage was great for 2 years. About 2 years into the marriage, things started changing, and along with that change came a lot of anxiety for me. I got so much anxiety. I didn't eat. I lost a lot of weight because of not eating. I was always in my room. I was scared when he came. I was scared to think about him coming home because I didn't know what kind of mood he'd be in. I didn't know if he'd be happy, or I didn't know if he'd be angry, or I didn't know if my parents were going to be fighting or anything. I didn't know. So I was like, I gotta be in my room when he comes home. So I would make my mom make dinner before he came home, and I would eat it really fast and run into my room. And the hardest part about seeing my stepdad and my mom change was seeing how it affected my mother. Oh, my mom fell into this really deep depression. It's like she didn't want to do anything with her life. She didn't even want to live. And I was really the only person she had to talk to about that stuff. So she would tell me how she felt and everything that was going through her head. And that was on my shoulders all the time, every second of every day. I would go to sleep worrying, is my mom going to wake up? Am I going to find her somewhere? Or what's going to happen? And that was not good for my health. My anxiety got worse. I was eating less and less, which was not okay because I was already not eating a lot. But the only thing that would really get me through it was two things. One was a girl named Hannah Woodson. She's not here right now, but she's probably the one thing and the one person that every time I was upset, I'd be like, Hannah, I just can't do it today. I can't come to church. I can't do this. She would always, no matter what emotion I was feeling, anger, sadness, happy, joyful, bubbly, whatever emotion it was, she was always like, you got to come to church because I'm not going to let you fall away from God. And the second thing that helped me get through it was God's promise that he was never going to leave me and that he's never going to fail me. And also, when God gives you a promise, he keeps that promise. He promised Abraham a son and a few descendants, and we here. And he also promised that he was never going to flood the earth again after Moses, and we're still here. I mean, it may look like it's flooding outside right now, but that's just Georgia. But we're still here. He's not going to flood the earth again, so he keeps his promises. Which brings me to the next verse, where he says, no man shall be able to stand before you for all of the days of your life, just as I was with Moses. So I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. In another version, it says, I will never fail you or abandon you, which is exactly what my father did. And my stepfather failed me because he gave me so much anxiety that I still deal with today. And that promise will never leave my head. I'm like, okay, God, you got me. I know you do. When I start getting angry at my father for not caring about my church life, I'm like, okay, God cares. Or when I start getting anxiety because I feel like something's going to happen, or when I don't know what's going to happen, I'm like, okay, God, it's in your hands. And that brings me to my point, which is a fill-in on your connection on your bulletin. It says, don't let anger for one person turn into hatred towards God. Y'all, I almost let the anger for my father leaving, for my stepfather being not a very good person, I almost let that ruin my relationship with God. And I'm so glad that I didn't. For a year, God has been asking me to get up on this stage and share a message with you. And I was like, no, God, why would I do that? Why would I praise your name? Why would I get up on stage and talk about how great you are when you gave me these two people to fall in love with, and for these two people to get so attached to and just take them away from me, and for them to cause me so much pain? And he was like, you just got to do it. do it. Get up on stage and I'll show you why I want you to do this. So eventually I was like, okay, whatever. So I'm here. I'm doing it. I would have missed the opportunity to speak to someone who's probably dealing with some of the same things that I am, if not something somewhat similar, something exactly the same. Like there's so many things that I could talk to you about my father. There's so many things that I could talk to you about my stepfather, but I don't have the time for. But I'm here and I'm doing it because God said, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to abandon you. And I want you to share that message with other people. So I am. Don't let your anger for one person turn into hatred towards God, because he has a bigger plan for it. He does. And since I'm saying all that, I'm going to ask Chandler to come back out and finish the message. Wherever he is. Chandler.
There you go. I mean, I'm supposed to follow that? There's no better way to explain that. She broke it down for you on a level that probably hits close home to a lot of you guys. Way better than I could. This crusty old guy up here talking about parents, it's like, that's your grandparent age. But we're going to close this out. And the things I want you to take from this is Philippians 4, 6, and 7. It says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So what does that mean? It means tell him, thank him, wait and experience peace. Today, so many people will give up anything just for peace. They'll pay ridiculous amounts of money because they don't know what peace is. They're searching for peace. The formula is right there. Tell, thank, experience. And his peace will guard your hearts and minds. Don't raise your hands, but just think about it. How many of you have had broken hearts or broken minds? I mean, your friends are going to let you down. Parents may or may not let you down at some point. You might let them down. But through it all, and what Jordyn just talked about, is where do you turn to when you feel that everything is broken? God. You got to give it all up to him. So we've talked about the problems. We've talked about broken relationships. I get it, Chandler. I've identified that. How do I fix it? Well, here's some steps. Sometimes you just got to face your problems head on. And that might be your parents. And you got to tell them straight up, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, I love you. Like I told my boys, right after we have a huge yelling match, and I mean, I can put a little bass in the voice and put the, you know the dad voice, just Mufasa. You don't like it when your dad or mom screams at you. And I'll tell them, say it with me. I don't like you, Dad, but I love you. I love you. And that's cool, because I can guarantee your parents don't all like you all the time. And if you thought they did, I'm sorry to break your bubble. They don't like you all the time, but they love you all the time. But get this, Jesus loves you unconditionally. And he made you, so he pretty much likes you. So you got that going for you. So you start by just telling your parents, hey, I appreciate you and I love everything you've done for it. Hey, God, thank you for everything you've done for me, and I love you. When was the last time you told God you loved him? And like Jordyn said, well, you know what? Dr. Phil's not going to remove that hate for you. That last piece of chocolate cake's not going to remove it for you. So you have to let Jesus remove your hate. He's the only one that's going to do it, but you got to tell him you have it. When you're salty just for being salty and you don't even know why. When someone's like, why are you so angry? Why are you so bitter all the time? You can't just cop out and say, oh, life. You know why. So you tell your parents you love them. You ask Jesus to remove the hate. But you got to replace the hate with Jesus. So let him live in your heart. Let him lead you to it. He's got all the answers. It's way too easy. You got to have faith and trust in him. So as you get ready to close this out, why don't you go ahead and stand up. Come on up to the front. As the band gets ready to come on out and play, I really guys want you to think about the relationships that you have. Some of you have great relationships with your parents, and that's awesome. But what makes it great? Is communication? Is it the fellowship in God? What is it? Think about that. Think about when you go leave tonight, what can you do to make your relationships with your family better? All right, let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. We're able to come here and just gather in your name with friends and family and just keeping us safe while we're here. All the craziness that's going on in the world, especially Atlanta. Some of us have a lot of hate in our heart, a lot of bitterness, and just unchecked aggression. We don't know why. We just ask that you help remove it and help us get right with you, with our relationships with you and our family, and help us make it better this week. Show us what relationships really are important, the ones we need to invest in. In your name we pray. Amen.